Hi, Philippe.
Hello, Anand.
How are you?
Fine, thank you very much.
Yeah, it's a huge honor to have you here today.
A pleasure for me.
Yeah, so today my guest is Philippe Toint. He's an emeritus professor of mathematics at the University of Namur in Belgium, specializing in numerical analysis, OR, and continuous optimization. His academic career has centered on the theory, computation, and software design of large-scale nonlinear optimization, including the co-development of the LANCELOT software package and contributions to truss region and filter methods. Philippe has co-authored several books and about 200 papers, the vast majority of which were published in highly regarded journals. He was elected a SIAM Fellow in 2009, received the Beale-Orchard-Hays Prize in 1994, and the Lagrange Prize in Continuous Optimization in 2006. He also served as chair of the Mathematical Optimization Society from 2010 to 2012. Philippe, I'm very grateful that you have accepted the invitation. Looking forward to having a great conversation with you.
Same for me.
All right. So, Philippe, you were born in Belgium in 1952. Where specifically?
Well, I was born in Brussels, like a lot of Belgians, actually.
Okay. So you come from the French part of the country, as I suspected?
Yes, yes. My mother was a French teacher, so I'm very much in the French culture from that point of view.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so you mentioned your mom. What can you tell me about your family background? Maybe starting with your grandparents.
My grandfather on my father's side was a lawyer working for the government, and my grandfather from the mother's side was a financial official and an archer. Interestingly enough, he was the best archer in Brussels at the time.
Wow. No,
Yes.
that's pretty random.
Yes, that's quite curious, isn't it?
Yeah. Amazing.
I enjoyed it very much when I was a kid because he would show me his prizes from competitions and so on. So that was quite funny.
Amazing.
My father was an engineer, an urban planner. And as I said, my mother was a French teacher.
Uh-huh.
So that gives you some background.
Yeah. Did any of your relatives were involved in the Second World War?
Not directly. I mean, my father and mothers were very young at the time, and my father moved to France as a youngster to avoid being drafted by the German. He told me a few times the story, but I don't know very much more than that.
Okay. Do you have siblings?
I have a brother who is a movie producer, and I had a sister who was a philosopher and died in a car accident more than 35 years ago.
Wow. I'm sorry to hear that, but at the same time, I'm again very much impressed by your brother's career, like a movie producer.
Well, yes.
Yeah. So he's mainly based in Belgium, or did he produce
Yes.
movies elsewhere?
No, mainly based in Belgium.
Okay. And how were your childhood years?
Well, I think they were quite peaceful and nothing special about them. I moved a few times with my parents from Brussels to another place south of Brussels, and then from that place to a place near Liège in another part of Belgium, and then finally to my current place in Namur. So I moved quite a bit, but otherwise these were the really big events on my childhood, honestly.
Okay, so it was sort of an eventless childhood.
Yes, quite happy, I would say. So from that point of view, some people are marked by their childhood in a negative way. Certainly not my case.
Yeah, that's very good for you. And did you have any interest in sports?
Oh, yes, I did. Like all kids, I play a bit of football. I did some skiing, a lot of cycling when I was a youngster. I swam a lot. I still like swimming a lot. So swimming is one of my favorite sports. I played tennis somewhat, just like most youngster and people of the time. It's nothing very special. I was never really very competitive, except once in swimming. I did take part once in a swimming competition, but that was it. Nothing really. I'm not such a sporty type, I have to say.
Do you like to watch sports?
Not that much. I spent some time yesterday evening to watch the semi-final of the World Football Cup, but that's all I can do.
Yeah, Belgium actually did all right in this World Cup.
Yes, it went to quarterfinal, which I think was quite amazing already. But
Yeah. And what about music? Did you play any musical instruments?
yes, music is very important for me, and I played various instruments with various levels of perfection. I started with badly playing the piano and the organ. Then I took lessons to play the Baroque recorder. I sang for the best of 40 years in a choir, and now I'm just learning piano again. So it's a long part of my activity, and it's important for me to listen to music in general. It's an important part of my life.
Yeah, same here. But 40 years in a choir, that's just unbelievable. It's a huge time frame.
Oh, yeah, yes. So we sung many pieces, mostly from the Baroque and Renaissance music. Monteverdi, Bach, Buxtehude, Handel, and others, and also some Brahms and more modern ones. But we were mostly in the Renaissance and Baroque music. I like it very much.
Yeah, and when you mentioned Baroque music, I immediately thought of Bach, obviously.
Yes.
Was one of the greatest, and he arranged many pieces like that, right? In Leipzig, especially when he went there later. So so I was wondering, when did you start singing?
Or when I was 18, something like that, or maybe a little bit before.
Right. And what kind of music did you like to listen to when you were young?
Essentially the same sort of music, but I also listen to a lot of jazz and some pop music as well. So I'm quite eclectic in terms of listening to music. There are lots of music I like. I like music quite a lot, and in fact, so much I have 11,000 songs on my phone, and I'm listening to them mostly at random, just to make sure I don't forget any of this.
Yeah, so throughout the day, you might listen to classical music, then jazz, then
yes,
pop.
And sometimes the transitions are very good. Sometimes they're not so good. But,
yeah, that should be fun.
Interesting.
Yeah, you're listening to some Baroque music, then all of a sudden you're listening to Beatles, and then you're jumping to other things. Yeah, very nice. Great. And when it comes to books, what are your preferences?
I read a lot when I was younger, and now I'm mostly reading technical stuff and things related to my work, which is not so pleasant, maybe. I also read magazines and news in general, so maybe the non-technical stuff I'm reading nowadays is mostly news and comments and analysis on the international situation and political scene.
But when you were young, did you have any particular preferences in terms of
I read just
style?
everything I could put my hand on. For quite a few years, I read a book a day on average, which was just crazy in a sense. But I read just everything from philosophy book to thrillers, science fiction, poetry, theater, just anything I could put my hands on.
Right. You mentioned poetry, like Ronnie Bental, which I had the chance to interview. You also enjoy writing poems, right?
Yes. I think it's a very good way of expression. It's very nice. I'm glad to hear Ronnie is also interested, but certainly I like it, yes.
Have you ever thought of releasing a book?
I have published a few books, a few small sample of poems. They are not widely known though, so I'm not a very well-known poet. Forget about that.
It's all in French, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, very nice. So you really have a knack for humanities, don't you?
Well, when I was in high school, I was essentially studying Old Greek and Old Latin for 6 years, and I turned to science mostly by accident, much to the dismay of my professors at the time.
Okay, so what's your favorite philosopher?
Well, hard to say, but Plato is one, Spinoza is another. That probably are the two that I like best.
Uh-huh. You mentioned Spinoza. Do you consider yourself as a skeptical person?
Yes, to some extent, I'm pretty skeptical.
Uh-huh. Yes. Were you a good student in school?
I think so. I mean, I'm not the one to say, but as far as I remember, I never had any problem, and I was typically in the best of the class. So yes, I was a good student, I suppose.
Uh-huh. And why did you decide to study mathematics?
Oh, because in the last 2 years of my high school, I had a great teacher who just showed me that it could be interesting and challenging and mind-teasing, and so I decided to try. But I was completely ill-prepared because I had a very weak course in maths during my high school, and so it was a real shock when I went in first year of mathematics.
Okay, so I mean, you began your studies at University of Namur in 1970,
Yes.
and you really had difficulties adapting to this new environment, right?
Well, difficulties was mostly a surprise. I remember in my first lectures, I see the professor drawing some funny signs on the blackboard. I had no idea what it meant, and I was trying to draw the same sort of thing on my sheet of paper, and it's only later that I understood what it was actually about. So it took me a while to get into the mood and into this form of mind, but it was okay. I managed in the end.
Very interesting. You also studied physics at the same time for 2 years before dropping out, correct?
Yes, and in fact, I dropped out because it was impossible to continue to do both math and physics at the same time, essentially because of the laboratories, which were too time-consuming in physics. But yes, I would have liked to continue, but that turned out to be impossible. I liked physics a lot, actually. Well, I've applied optimization to several physical problems, so from that point of view, not everything is lost on me. I've worked for instance, in the design of optical lenses or in weather forecasting, which is very much a physical problem.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yes, definitely. I liked the physical background.
All right. Yeah, fair enough. And did you take any optimization classes?
I had a course in optimization in the very last year of my course, and I wasn't very good, at least from what my prof says. He claimed that I did not understand anything about the KKT conditions. Fortunately, the colleagues and my professors at the time didn't quite believe him, I think, and so I passed nevertheless. But it was not my greatest mark ever, for sure.
And it seems that optimization was not very popular in French-speaking countries at a time, right?
Well, optimization was no. I think convex analysis was more popular at the time, and also numerical analysis was dominated by PDEs, and that was the case for many years. And so, for instance, my topic for my final work to get my graduation was on PDE constrained optimal control. So that was more fashionable at the time than nonlinear optimization, for sure.
Yeah, partial differential equations can be quite challenging.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So you started dating your wife around that time. How did you meet, and when did you get married?
Yeah, well, I met her in the choir I was mentioning before, so we were singing together, and we knew each other in 1973, 74, and got married in 77. And just after I spent a year in Cambridge for my thesis, so that was quite an experience for both of us.
Yeah. And I asked this because I know that she's very important in your life, and she deserves to be mentioned here for sure, right?
No, absolutely, yes.
Yeah. And what was your next step after graduating?
Well, when I graduated, I was hired by the university right away as a teaching assistant this job was essentially half-time research and half-time teaching. And so I started my thesis immediately, and I was looking at problems using conjugate gradient methods, derivative-free method inspired by Michael Powell's work. And this is essentially my first two papers are about that subject.
So I know you mentioned a couple of topics, but I would like to know essentially what was your PhD work about?
Well, when I asked Michael Powell, what were the proposals for the subject, and he told me I could choose between two subjects. One was SQP and the other one was large-scale nonlinear problems. And I did the wrong choice. I chose the second. Otherwise, my name would be associated with SQP, but that's too bad. And so I chose the other one and started working on the sparse quasi-Newton methods. And I derived the first sparse quasi-Newton method at the time, which was quite useful. And the rest of my thesis was essentially building on that and working out the theory, the experiments, and the software associated with this sort of topic.
Yeah. So SQP, for those who are not familiar with, is sequential quadratic programming.
Yes,
right?
that is correct. It's one of the most important methods for solving constraint problem, and it's quite popular.
Yeah. So you mentioned Mike Powell. We are going to talk about him shortly. That's a very important part of your story. But you have a couple of anecdotes about the 1975 conference in Dundee in Scotland.
Yes, that was my first conference as a PhD student. I was sent by my university to this conference, and I remember very well getting off the plane in Edinburgh and taking the bus to Dundee. And the guy sitting next to me in the bus was a nice gentleman whom I didn't know. And we started talking, and it turned out to be Ovi Mangazarian. And we have kept excellent contact with Ovi since then. I mean, he's a very nice person, and I have appreciated him very much. And he was very considerate for a student at the time, which was also much in his personality, I think. And when I arrived in Dundee, I met Michael Powell for the first time. And then, I was asking him whether he knew somebody in the UK I could possibly work with. And then he started asking me a few questions about my interest and so on. And then he said, "Why don't you work with me?" And I said, "Sure." And that's how I started this long story with Michael, which was very fruitful and very important for me.
Were you aware that he was a big name at a time?
He was the Pope of the discipline, honestly. So that's why I didn't dare to ask working with him immediately, because I thought it was maybe too ambitious. So I was asking for a recommendation for somebody else. But, since he proposed to work with him, of course, I said yes.
Yes. And Philippe, I think around that time, some people were highly skeptical about the numerical capabilities of the methods, right? Especially when it comes to inverting matrices and so on. Do you have any memories from any events?
Yes, certainly. Linear algebra was a very important field, and in particular, there was a big emphasis on error analysis. And a very important person in error analysis was Jim Wilkinson from England. And I remember him very well saying that it would be forever impossible to invert a 20 by 20 matrix, which today looks amusing, I think. But at the time, he was really worried about rounding errors and issues of that type. And although he was a very, very bright person, I think he misread the future there.
Yes, and we were talking about the 70s.
Yes,
yeah.
Late 70s. But that changed pretty quickly, though. I mean, it didn't take long in optimization for people like Phil Gill, Walter Murray, Margaret Wright, and Michael Saunders to take the lead in using very good linear algebra techniques in optimization. So that was very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, also known as the Gang of Four.
Yes. But there was the time where people were worried about updating matrix factorizations and things like that. This looks a little bit quaint now, but it was all the rage.
Yeah. So in 1977, you went to work with the legendary Mike Powell in Cambridge for a little over 6 months. That was possible because you received funding from the Royal Society, right?
Yes, that was quite a story in itself, because I had applied to the Royal Society and got the grant, but the guy who was responsible for my file died in the middle of the process. And so when I arrived in Cambridge, there was no file available in the Royal Society about my grant, and no money in my bank account as a consequence. And so I had a hard time for the first 2 weeks while this was being sorted out. And when it was sorted out, they still did a big mistake, or an amusing mistake. They misclassified me, and instead of being a PhD student, I was classified as a senior visitor. And as a result, I was invited to sherry parties with the colleges, the fellows of the colleges in Cambridge. I was the only young person around. They had a lot of fun, and I had a lot of fun too.
That's incredible. I mean, so you mingle with the senior people while still PhD students?
Yes. That was quite amusing.
Yeah. So which college were you affiliated with?
I was not affiliated to any college, because Michael Powell at the time was not affiliated to any college. And as a consequence, I was working in the Department of Applied Physics and Mathematics in Silver Street. And my office was not far from Michael Powell's, but there was no former affiliation. And so we spent, for instance, lunchtime together in the Gratz Center, having lunch every day and then discussing my progress or my lack of progress. And that was quite challenging for me, and I learned a lot from that.
Yeah. Cambridge has 30 plus colleges nowadays, and it's
yeah, it's a big university, and I think Mike subsequently was accepted by a college, but that was after I left.
Yeah, I visited Cambridge very recently, maybe a couple weeks ago, and it's an incredible city. It's not only historical, but the environment is very nice.
Yes,
and Mike Powell actually never formally got a PhD degree and faced some difficulties because of that, didn't he?
Well, when he graduated, he was hired directly by the Atomic Energy Research Establishment, and so he didn't work for a PhD, but it didn't prevent him to become a very well-known person in optimization. And when there was a chair opening in Cambridge, he was selected to fill the chair, although he was not a PhD. And there was a bit of a problem in the Cambridge establishment, which is so formal on many things. And so he was a bit upset about those problems. And that was one reason why he was not accepted immediately by a college when he arrived in Cambridge. But fortunately, he applied and got a DSc later, which is a doctoral in sciences. It's a super PhD, a very honorific title, which erased this unfortunate past.
And is it true that he was not allowed to have lunch with his fellow colleagues because he didn't have a PhD?
He was not a fellow of a college, so there was no college which he could have gone to. So that's why he was having lunch with me.
Yes, and you took advantage of that. That's good.
Yes, definitely. Yes.
And were you his first PhD student in a way? And what did you learn from him?
I was his first PhD student in Cambridge for sure, because when I actually decided to work with him and when he accepted me, he was still working at Harwell. And so I had to wait a little bit until he got installed in Cambridge properly before I could move there. So I was definitely his first student there, that's for sure. Yes, I learned enormously from him, and it was he was a person with very high standards for everybody, including himself, but also for his students. And so that was pretty tough at times, but I survived somehow. And there was one amusing story. When I arrived, I was a reasonable Go player. And Mike wanted to learn Go. And so while he was teaching me mathematics in the day, I spent some evening teaching him Go. That was a reverse role, which I enjoyed very much. We both enjoyed it very much, actually.
Uh-huh. And did he end up playing well?
Not really. Go is a game where the game stops when both players agree there is nothing else to do. Mike, being as competitive as he was, would never agree there was nothing to do, and so he would lose more and more. And he didn't like that very much. And I think from that point on, he sort of stopped playing Go, as far as I know.
Uh-huh.
Maybe because of that. I don't know.
Yeah, you mentioned that he was tough at times. Could you elaborate more on this, just for us to have a sort of a better idea of his style?
He was quite direct and to the point, and so he was in a way rightly inquisitive about concepts. He didn't let vagueness hang around. And so if you had a vague idea, that didn't fit with this view of things. And so the ideas had to be precise, and the result had to be verified, and there was no room for approximations. Although he was an expert in approximation theory, there was no room for approximating concepts, for sure.
Yeah.
And for young students, that is sometimes difficult, but I guess that's how you learn.
Yes. You took it from a positive side, and that was extremely beneficial for you in the end.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So when he died, you and Coralia Cartis went to his office to clear it and found an interesting letter to John Dennis, who's one of the key figures in the field of nonlinear optimization. What makes it so special?
Well, first of all, Coralia and I visited and went to clear up his office, because I was Mike's first student and Cora was Mike's last student. And so that was a fitting qualification for us to do this important task. And the letter in question was a letter he wrote to John Dennis while I was working on the sparse quasi-Newton update I mentioned before. Because John Dennis, as a student working on more or less on the same topic, but I managed to get the result first. And I think the student and John were a bit annoyed by that. And so Mike wrote to them a letter saying that, well, that was life, and that, I was a nice guy and I could understand that somebody else was working on the topic, which of course I did. And I was quite pleased to meet the other guy in a conference a year after that. But he was called Earl Marwill, but he left the field for a few years later. So I have lost track of what he has become.
Uh-huh. And how was the feeling of, returning to that office and, with him no longer there? Did it spark any, memories and, particular reactions?
Of course, I was quite close to him and his family. I knew his wife and kids very well. And so, yes, it was a very sad moment for both Cora and me, and also for other students of Mike, I know for sure. So this was a very sad moment and a very sad year. Somebody needed to do it, and I was asked to do it for the reasons I mentioned, and of course I accepted. But it was not something particularly fanciful, of course.
Yeah, exactly. Like someone has to do that. And when he died, it seemed like the end of an era.
It was certainly the end of an impressive career. And yes, in a sense, the end of an era. I think John Dennis used that phrase.
Oh, nice. And did you have the chance to meet some important names in the field while you were in Cambridge?
Of course, yes. I mean, Mike had a lot of visitors, and so I would meet them. And the first time I got my first result, when I knocked on Mike's door to talk about it, there was another guy in the room whom I didn't know, and it turned out to be Bill Davidon, the co-author of the DFP method. And so Mike told me that I had to explain my result to both of them. And Bill was quite enthusiastic about the result. So that helped me too, actually. So I have a very good memory of that. But of course, I met other people. Charles Broyden was often there. Roger Fletcher, of course, which was a colleague and friend of Mike. Donald Goldfarb, David Chano, Alan Curtis, John Reed, Ian Duff, many people I remember very fondly. Also, Mike was hard to convince about the new stuff, but once he was convinced, he was your best advocate. And that was very helpful. In later conferences, he would introduce me to other people and mention my results and be very positive about it. So that definitely helped me quite a lot.
Yeah. Jorge Nocedal mentioned something similar, that he helped him quite a bit in promoting his ideas
yes, he was a very good advocate of other people's idea once he got convinced, which was not easy.
Okay, so we mentioned Bill Davidon. He's known to be the creator of the first quasi-Newton method, right?
Yes.
And he was also involved in this FBI story, which I mentioned in Jorge Nocedal's episode. And you mentioned Broyden, Fletcher, Goldfarb, and Chano. So the BFGS
yes.
method.
Of course.
Yeah. So
also, I remember also another guy, Lawrence Dixon, very fondly. He was from Hatfield. He was also a very important person at the time and a very nice gentleman.
Yes, it's all amazing. And around 1977, you also met Mehiddin Al-Baali, who became one of your best friends in the field. How did you guys meet?
Mehi was a student of Roger Fletcher's. And so because Mike and Roger were meeting regularly, the underlings met as well. And so that's how I became to know Mehi. And we've kept good contact throughout the years. And not so long ago, I visited him in Oman, where he still organizes optimization conferences there. And so we've kept excellent relations from that time.
Nice. You graduated in 1978. What were the main contributions of your PhD thesis?
But I think it was essentially about large-scale nonlinear optimization. So using sparsity, using structure, and in particular using a structure which is called the partially separable structure. That was not directly in my thesis, but came just immediately after. But the thesis was essentially in this direction, using structure for large, at the time, large problems. And again, looking at it in retrospect, large at the time meant 50 variables, which again today is somewhat amusing given the size of problem we solve today. So that large was 50 variables at the time. And yes, and I was also interested in estimating Hessian matrices at the time using finite difference. I've co-authored only 2 papers with Michael Powell, and one of them was on this topic, and it was during my thesis, and he was a bit upset because it ended up being Appendix 7 in my thesis. And so he thought that was not very respectful, but anyway, he could tolerate it in the end. It was a good paper, I think. I still remember it very well.
Appendix 7, how many appendices did you have?
I don't remember, something like 10 or so.
Wow. Mike Powell ended up being the president of the examination committee of your PhD, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
So he went there to Namur and...
Yes, he came here and stayed with us, with his family, and we had a very good time. I mean, they had become friends in the meantime, so it was a real pleasure to have him around, as well as a good opportunity for my thesis, of course.
Mm-hmm. So ultimately, he was the main advisor of your PhD work.
Yes, certainly. I'm definitely one of my students, for sure.
What a privilege. Your name became quite associated with truss region methods. Could you please provide a brief explanation of this framework in the context of quasi-Newton methods?
But it's not directly related to quasi-Newton methods, although it was invented in that context. I mean, the idea is that you have a nonlinear problem, a nonlinear function, non-convex possibly, and you have an approximation of the Hessian matrix. And so you can build the second order Taylor's model around your current point, and this model need not be convex. So if you want to minimize that model, well, it may lead you to infinity, so you have to restrict yourself to a sort of region around the current point. And in this region, you hope you trust the model that you've built using the Taylor expansion. And this is the trust region. So you minimize the quadratic model in that region, this trust region, and this gives you a step. And then you move on from there.
Yeah.
So that's how trust regions were invented.
Okay.
At the beginning, there was no fixed vocabulary about that. Roger Fletcher was talking about restricted step method. I used the word confidence region for a while, and then it's a paper by John Dennis and Holger Morey, I think in 1980, which solidified the terminology about this type of methods, which remains amongst the very best for solving large-scale problems and difficult ones.
Mm-hmm. Who came up with this method originally? Was it Mike Powell?
Yes, it was Mike Powell in a paper about the PSB update, one of the quasi-Newton update, and it was in the 1970 exactly.
Yeah.
So this method is 1970 by Michael Powell.
Yeah, that's why I asked this, because about this connection with quasi-Newton methods due to the quadratic approximation aspect. Because I know Mike Powell liked a lot quadratic programming, right?
Yes.
So I'm not an expert in the field, so I was wondering whether this has any connection or it was just something that turned out to be useful at a time.
Well, it was necessary in a way, because the update Mike was working at the time was not like BFGS or DFP, in the sense that it did not guarantee that the matrix would stay positive definite. And from that point of view, the quadratic model associated with it need not be convex. And if it's not convex, then you have the problem I just mentioned, and you need to restrict your step in the region around the current literate. So it was necessary to do something about that. There were other techniques like resorting to the true function and doing a line search. This was and still is popular, but it's a different way to look at things. And trust region has become, I think, one of the staples of nonlinear optimization. It's a very important method today.
Right. So Philippe, the 1979 ISMP, which is the International Symposium on Mathematical Programming, was an important one for you, right?
Yes, I met two people I ended up working with for many, many years at that conference, Nick Gould and Andy Conn. The conference was in Montreal, and Andy was working in Waterloo. So I was looking for a place to visit after the conference, and Andy generously offered to host me for a few days. And I went to Waterloo and met Nick, who was working there at the time. And so we went along very well, discussed many things, the needs to work on large-scale problems and the needs to write software to do it. And we didn't do anything for a while. And then a few years later, I think it was in 81, Andy went for a sabbatical in France, in Grenoble. And there was an opportunity for Nick, Andy, and me to meet. And we started working on trust regions at that time. And it has resulted in a long story of collaboration and friendship with these two people. I think we wrote more than 50 papers together. It's a long story, but a long and very nice story, which I'm very proud of.
Yeah, unbelievable. It's not that easy to have this very long-term collaboration. I mean, 50 papers. That's just insane, I think. You also met other important collaborators in the early 80s, didn't you?
Yes, I mean, one of the collaborators I worked with in the beginning of my career was Andreas Griewank from Germany. And it is with him that we worked on this partially separable structure, which is an important structure in many problems. It's when you can think of a function being separable when you can split into various pieces and the variables don't interact. It's partially separable when there is some interaction between the variables, but not a full interaction. And so this structure can be used. In particular, it was used for designing very efficient quasi-Newton methods, but it can be used in other contexts. And we worked on that topic with Andreas Griewank for a few years. It was a very nice collaborator, and then he got interested in automatic differentiation and did most of his career in this sector later on.
And what sparked your interest in studying partially separable functions? And could you explain why you consider this topic so relevant while highlighting your main contributions to it?
Well, as I mentioned, these partially separable functions, they are functions which consist of sum of functions, and each one of these functions is defined on a small dimensional subspace. And so the fact that these subspaces are small dimensional means that there are lots of things you can do. If you want to approximate derivatives, say in a quasi-Newton method, or if you want to search for other types of questions, the fact that you can look at each of these spaces individually, each of them is quite small, typically 2 or 3 dimensions, sometimes 5 or 10, but that's quite exceptional. So they remain small dimensional, but the total thing can be very large. And so you can use this structure to solve very, very large problems while focusing on small dimensional linear algebra, for instance. And also you can show that every function whose Hessian is sparse, which is a very large class of problems, is partially separable for sure. So that's a very wide class, and it covers, for instance, all discretized problems and many others. So it's a very, very interesting class of problems.
Very interesting. So through this type of approach, you can devise more efficient algorithms, right?
Yes, and there is a strong connection between partial separability and sparsity, of course. And there are many things that can be done, frontal methods and whatever. I mean, there are many connections there that can be exploited to good effect.
Yeah, sparsity is something that the people from the field like to take advantage, right?
Well, when you have structure, whatever it is, you should take advantage of it. The structure is what allows us to solve large problems. If they were unstructured, we would be just lost.
Yes, absolutely. We have to talk about your award-winning LANCELOT software from the early 90s. Tell me the story behind its name and development and why it became a very successful project.
Well, this was the project we started with Nick Gould and Andy Conn. So we designed the name, which has something to do with augmented Lagrangian in an evening with some wine and some beer around. And after some joyous moment, we stumbled on this acronym, which stayed with us. And so we used it. And the software was with Minus, the software by Michael Saunders, was one of the first, or maybe the first software, the first package for solving large-scale nonlinear problems, constrained and unconstrained. And from that point of view, it was very successful. It was very robust. It still is very robust. It's still being used. And it's a method which was a precursor of what came next, like IPOpt and other big packages. But it was the first one, I think, which people really used for solving practical large-scale problems. And from that point of view, yes, because of its successful, it's been quoted quite a bit, for sure.
Yeah, haven't you thought of making it commercial?
Yes and no. We thought we were all paid by the public funds, and so we wanted to make our research public. We made some restriction on its use. We didn't want it to be used for the design of weapons, but although otherwise everything was allowed.
Very interesting. That's an interesting fun fact, actually. And what about Qt? Again, a very interesting name, you should mention that, which is a project related to the design of a collection of test problems. Did you expect this project to be that successful?
No, not at all. When we worked on LANCELOT, we needed a collection of test problems to test the software on. And at the time, test problems were exchanged by exchanging reports and pieces of paper. And so there was a very high likelihood of reproducing or introducing mistakes in the statements of the functions or the derivatives and so on. And so we decided that we would need something which would be a file that would we could exchange and make sure the thing was the same as before. And so we worked on a format for writing down these problems, and we ended up with a collection of about 1,000 problems. And since we had them and we used them for testing LANCELOT, we thought we could just give them away as well so that people could use them in the same way. And in fact, it has been probably even more successful than LANCELOT. It's still the major benchmarking test for nonlinear optimization today. And its success was honestly quite unexpected. We expected to be used for a few years, of course, otherwise you wouldn't have done the work. But the success was beyond our expectation. And of course, it requires maintenance and development, which we did, and we also did with Dominique Aubin and other people. But that was really a success from that point of view. A bit unexpected, but nevertheless very pleasant.
Yeah, a neat and cute benchmark. You have to tell me about the name.
I don't remember how we came about that name. It was Constrained and Unconstrained Testing Environment, I think. At the time, we didn't realize it would be confused with other unpleasant site on internets, but this happened later. So it was too late to change the name.
Okay. And in 2000, you co-authored a 900-page book on truss region methods with Andy Conn and Nick Gould. Tell me a bit about this book, which has over 4,000 citations on Google Scholar.
Well, this book started as a course I thought in my university. I thought a course about truss region, and I started writing notes about the basics. And since I had those notes, I suggested to the two other guys that what about, elaborating on this? And unfortunately, maybe we could not stop. There was always something else to say and something else to add. And so the book grew to 900 pages. In retrospect, I'm not so sure this is such a great idea to have such a massive book. But it turned out to be quite useful in the end, and people have quoted it quite a bit, as you said, because it's been the standard book on this subject for more than 20 years now.
And how long did it take for you guys to finish writing the book?
About 3 years, if I remember well. So yes, that was about that. We had the good support for SIAM from that point of view, and the writing was quite time-consuming, as you would expect. But yes, it took a little bit more than 3 years.
So each of you wrote about 300 pages, 100 pages per year.
It's a more complicated story than that, but never mind. I mean, it ended up being that monster. Some people say the nicest thing about it is the cover, but I don't believe it.
Yes. And between 2000 and 2010, you did extensive work on filter methods, which led to one of your papers on the topic receiving the Lagrange Prize. Could you kindly give an overview of this class of methods, highlighting again your main contributions?
A filter method is a method for constraint optimization. So the idea is very simple in a way. If you look at standard methods for constraint optimization, maybe the most standard one is penalty functions. You add a penalization of the constraint in the objective function, and you minimize that, and then you increase the penalty and so on. You can do it a bit more intelligently using augmented Lagrangian, where the way you increase the penalty is more intelligent, essentially. Or you can also use SQP, the method I failed to be associated with, which is also a very good method. Filters are a bit different in the sense that they do not mix the objective function and the constraints. They consider them separately, a little bit like you would do in multi-objective optimization. And so you work in a sort of a plane where you have the objective function value on one hand and the constraint violation on the other. And the idea there is that you look at dominated point in that subspace, in that two-dimensional space, and you chop off bits of the space which are dominated. And so the idea there is that when you have chopped enough space, and that, well, you have to find the solution. And that the idea was originated with Roger Fletcher and Sven Leifer. And I worked with them to establish the theory, the convergence theory for that method, which turned out to be this paper we won the Lagrange Prize.
Fascinating. And Philippe, you were the president of MOS, the Mathematical Optimization Society, between 2010 and 2013. What were your main achievements?
Well, I mean, the main achievement was to run the society, but I think one important aspect that occurred at the time, it was between the transition between the time of the previous chairman, who was Steve Wright, and myself. And we launched the idea of modifying the name of the society. The society was called the Mathematical Programming Society. And this was inducing lots of confusion with computer science and difficulties with people in some departments. And we thought that calling the society the Mathematical Optimization Society would be better. And so we ran a consultation of all the members to see whether the idea would actually make enough consensus, and the consensus was very large, although there was some opposition, but not very numerous. So we could actually move on that change of name. We didn't change the name of the journal, although I would have liked to do it at the time. But the reason for not changing it was that it would mess up citations and bibliographical databases and so on. And so we gave up that. Maybe that was a mistake and we should have done it as well. But I mean, that's too late now. So, or maybe for some future president of the society, I don't know.
Yeah, but at least the transition was smooth within the community, with some people being a bit reluctant, but overall, based on your accounts, it seemed to have been the good choice.
Yes, and I still meet people regularly who recall that period as a positive change. And in particular, people who are in competition in departments with computer science, and it's sometimes difficult to make computer scientists believe that mathematical programming has nothing to do with programming. And so the fact that the society, at least, is called Mathematical Optimization was a progress.
Yeah. Sometimes I keep thinking about the implications of adopting the terminology programming back in the day to describe the field. I mean, linear programming, nonlinear programming, mathematical programming, and even dynamic programming.
I think it created difficulties for some people, for sure, and serious ones, which one of the reasons why Steve and I were motivated to do the change.
Yeah.
It was an historical fixture. I mean, in the early days, programming was conceived as a technique to achieve goals, which, of course, you could think of optimization as a technique to achieve some goals. No, programming turned out to be something else in later years, but in the origin, that was the idea.
Incidentally, there is Gould programming too. It's literally a technique.
Dynamic programming was one of the first, I think, and linear programming, along with linear programming.
Right.
That was George Danzig's work.
Yes, I know. Yeah. And sometimes I think about the operations research terminology too. That is also something that probably would be very difficult to
already today it's already a bit quaint to talk about operations research. Very few people know what it would mean actually.
Yeah.
Unless you're in the field, it's a bit obscure.
Yeah, but so many years pass by, many people discussing about this issue. But some people prefer to use now analytics, decision science, or varieties of this, right? So it's an open question. This issue of the name.
This is a question to ask to the president of the OR Society. Yeah? That's for the OR Society to decide.
Yeah, very difficult question. Because the community is much broader, right? So that's, very difficult question. So from 1979 to 2016, you had a second independent research career as a director of the transportation research group of your university.
In fact, from the very days of my thesis, in Belgium, we have to present a thesis and also an annex thesis, which is a development on another topic. And since my father was an urban planner, he asked me one day, what can you do about all this mathematics for urban planning? And I started to get interested in traffic assignment problems. And so this is a very nice mathematical problem, which has lots of good history and collaborators and nice theorems about it. And so I started working on this topic with colleagues, and I created a little group of people in my university who were interested in transportation and in traffic at the time. And of course, the thing evolved considerably over time. The focus on mathematical traffic assignment essentially disappeared. There were other questions about choice modeling, behavioral studies, surveys, whatever. Our group ran the first survey, the first national Belgian mobility survey, for instance, which was quite a massive task. So yes, it was a subject which in the beginning was close to optimization and turned out to diverge rather far away as year passed by. But I was interested for sure, yes.
Yeah, you conducted so many relevant activities and published, for example, many transportation science papers, which is very impressive. And some people might not be even aware of that, right? Because they associate your name mostly with nonlinear optimization. And
Well, that's quite funny because in my university, people think of me as being the transportation guy, not at all the optimization guy. And of course, in the optimization community, they don't know much about my transportation activities, but that's to be expected. There's nothing to worry about.
Yeah. Impressive. Two distinct careers, but very successful ones. So I mentioned 2016, you officially retired 10 years ago in 2016. What changed after that?
No longer meetings, no faculty meetings, no departmental stories, no boards of director. Essentially a lot of freedom for doing what I liked, which is very often research and also other things, but yes. But before going to, and I'm still doing research with somebody I met in the 1990s, in the mid-90s, Serge Gratton, who was a student in Fairfax in France, in Toulouse, France. And I've been visiting Toulouse many times since then. And I've also now have a long record track of publishing with Serge on various subjects. And so we continue to be interested, for instance, in method for deep learning and network training, for instance, a subject which has a lot of activities going on, as you know. So this continues in a way, and I think curiosity has not ended with my retirement, fortunately, and I'm still going on and doing so with good friends and colleagues.
Yeah, you also worked with him on data assimilation for weather
I
forecasting.
did work with him. The first thing I did with him, he was mostly in doing data assimilation at the time, and I joined him on a project like that. That's why I was mentioning weather prediction earlier. We did some data assimilation for weather forecasting together. That was very nice. And then we moved to other topic like regularization method. This branched out also with another group with whom I still have good contacts, which is a group in Florence, in Italy, with Benedetta Morini and Stefania Bellavia and Margherita Porcelli. Good people who I'm still working with on a regular basis, and I'm very pleased to be their collaborator.
Right. After retirement, you said that you also started doing other things. Can you give me an example outside academia?
One thing I did start 2 years before I retired was metal engraving. It was, I wanted to do something with my hands and not only with my brain, and so that turned out to be quite interesting. And I've now finished my courses on engraving, so I'm at the end of my classes. But it's been a very good time and a very pleasant activity, very expressive. And if you look at the book we published with Coralia, Cartis, and Gould on complexity theory, it has a lot of illustrations, which some of them are my engravings. So I've used them to illustrate mathematics as well. So
wonderful.
Quite pleasant, yes.
Wonderful. That's really impressive. And talking about them, a few years before the retirement, you started working in evaluating the complexity of algorithms for nonconvex optimization with the two of them, which led to a book published in 2022. What do you have to say about it?
Well, it was another long project. I mean, not so long as the Trost-Fusion book. We managed to be a bit faster. But it was a time where complexity began to be a major buzzword in optimization. And a lot of the theory was and still is for the convex case. And we thought that doing theory for the non-convex case was important and useful. And this led us to gather existing results, in particular results by Yuri Nesterov and others, but and write or run results for all the possible cases, constraints, no constraints, noisy, no noisy, many different frameworks, composite functions. And again, the book is too big for my taste, but it's very hard to stop once you're going on.
Yeah, you have an extensive knowledge, right, Philippe? So it's not a surprise that you're able to come up with these long books, because it's basically a compilation of many things that you have learned over the years, and I think that's very important for the community. I know you were doing research on deep learning and these type of things connected with AI. I would like to know what are your views regarding the AI revolution that we are currently experiencing, both from a teaching and research perspective?
Well, it's clearly a big revolution. I think whether it will lead us, I think, is unclear for the moment. There are various dangers and various advantages. The weighting of advantages versus drawbacks is still going on. There is, for instance, a very big debate in the publishing business about what is a referee, what is an author of a paper, and to some extent, what is knowledge? Is knowledge by humans, or possibly knowledge by machines as well? So when we say that our task is to make knowledge progress, which knowledge are you talking about? So these are serious questions. And I don't claim I have a final assessment about this. I think things are changing so fast, the technology is evolving so quickly that it's very hard to see where this is all going. But clearly, it's a very important issue and a very important turning point in the history of science, not only in mathematics, but in science in general, and probably society as a whole. It's an important question, but I'm not a guru, maybe unfortunately, but that is something we have to consider seriously and also take our responsibilities with respect to it and its use. It's a big tool, so like all tools, you can do wonderful things with it and you can do dreadful things with it. So it's our responsibility to act accordingly. Difficult choices sometimes.
Yeah, I see your point. But regarding the students, when it comes to teaching,
the students is yet another question. I mean, how do you teach students when they have access to AI? I think preventing them to get access to AI is rear guard battles. I think so it doesn't make much sense. But we should teach them how to use AI efficiently and responsibly. This is the main thing, I believe. So instead of preventing them or saying that it's no good to work with AI, no, I think we should encourage them to use it, but encourage them to use it in a responsible way and in a transparent way. I mean, in a sense, I keep finding that when you write something, would it be a paper or an essay or an exam or anything, you're responsible for what you write, and not a machine is responsible. You are responsible. And so you better check what you say is correct and meaningful.
Yes, thanks for sharing your thoughts on this. So let's see what happens in the next years.
Yes,
And
of course.
Philippe, did you have any involvement in the creation of the SIAM Journal optimization?
Well, maybe I have some involvement. I can tell you a story. I remember very well walking on the Saturday morning market in Namur here with Jean Golub, and Jean was visiting me, and we were discussing journals and publication policy and so on. And I mentioned to him that the then SIAM Journal on optimization and optimal control was mostly on optimal control, and that there was room, in my view, for a journal, a SIAM Journal on optimization proper. And I think that the idea struck a chord in Jean's mind, I think, and he went on discussing this idea with other people, I guess in North America, and then SIAM people and John Dennis and others. And maybe this conversation had a role in the creation of SIOP, but I certainly would not claim being the originator of the journal.
Yeah, but certainly you had at least some involvement to bring that conversation to the table, maybe. Yeah, but at some point that was quite relevant, right? I mean, to make that distinction between the optimal control and optimization as we know it.
And again, I think this was salient at the time. It may no longer be such a distinction because, in fact, the optimal control community has also moved in the direction of optimization, while optimization was moving in the direction of optimal control. So the two communities are closer than they were at that time. So, okay, but the two journals do their job very well, and there is no real reason to backtrack on this so far. I believe no, it's all right.
Yes. Philippe, do you have any regrets?
Oh, not enough time.
But that's beyond your control.
In my control, not really, no. Well, maybe missing over SQP is a big regret, but after 60 years, it's more or less in the past. So I don't worry about that. Otherwise, no, I think I had a career which was reasonable and fruitful, and I've met wonderful people. So I have, from that point of view, no regrets at all.
Yes, you're certainly a very fortunate person. And what are your plans for the future?
Well, as long as I can, continue to be curious, and as long as other people are willing to talk to me and possibly work with me, I'm happy to share. And that will hopefully be another some years. I don't know how many, but we'll see.
All right. And would you like to leave a takeaway message to our young viewers and listeners?
Well, I always think of a sentence that John Dennis said, which said not so long ago that today is the best time ever to be an optimizer, because the field has, seen this incredible increase in popularity, in relevance, in activity. So never a better time to be an optimizer than now.
Right. Fair enough. I agree with you. And I agree with John Dennis. Yes. So, Philippe, it was a huge honor to have this conversation with you. I had a lot of fun. You were certainly a very, very interesting person with many facets, not only in terms of research, but also on your personal interests. So it has been a treat, really. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much to you as well. It was a very pleasant conversation, and I hope your listener and viewers will be interested.
Yeah, for sure they will. So once again, thank you very much, Philippe. Merci beaucoup. And I wish you all the best. I wish you a happy future and also that you are in good shape. Take care of your health and looking forward to meeting you one of these days.
Well, goodbye, and I hope everything will be fine on your side as well.
Okay, thank you. Bye. Ciao.
Bye.